If you think we should control our borders, you are, by the definition of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, all racists.
Parliament erupts as Nigel Farage challenges Keir Starmer over his latest decision. You're not going to believe what just happened inside Parliament. For months, people have been whispering that a major confrontation was coming, and this week, it finally exploded. Nigel Farage stood face to face with Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and what unfolded next left the entire chamber buzzing. This wasn't your typical back and forth. It was heated, it was sharp, and depending on who you ask, it might just expose one of the biggest rifts in British politics right now. Because let's be honest, when Farage walks into a room, tension follows. And when Starmer responds, every word carries weight. But what made this exchange different was how personal it got. While everyone was focused on the economy, migration, and foreign policy, something else was brewing behind the scenes. Farage, who's been openly critical of Starmer's leadership for months, had been waiting for the perfect moment, and he got it during a live parliamentary debate this week. The topic? The government's new position on border management and the UK's post-Brexit trade relations with Europe. It sounds technical, sure, but the emotions in that room were anything but. Farage began by accusing the Prime Minister of selling out the Brexit promise, not in those exact words, but the tone was unmistakable. You told the British people one thing, Farage said, and now you're walking us backward into the same Brussels bureaucracy we fought to leave. The chamber erupted. Some MPs cheered, others jeered. Starmer, visibly irritated but composed, fired back with a calm yet cutting response. "Mr. Farage," he said, "you've made a career out of division. But this country needs solutions, not slogans." That line hit hard. Even some opposition benches murmured in agreement. But Farage wasn't done. He leaned forward, voice rising, finger slightly pointed. "Solutions, Sir Keir?" Then explained to the British public why every major policy of yours sounds like something written in Brussels, not Westminster. Gasps, murmurs, a few laughs. The Speaker had to intervene twice. Now, whether you agree with Farage or not, one thing's certain: this wasn't just political theater. This was a test of credibility. Farage represents the old guard of populist energy, tapping into national frustration and identity. Starmer, on the other hand, stands as the image of order, legality, and restabilization, the man trying to pull Britain back to the center after years of chaos. But that clash of visions, that's exactly why this confrontation is making waves. Political commentators immediately jumped online. One headline read, "Farage just reminded Starmer why he's still a force in British politics." Another analyst wrote, "Starmer's calm might win in Parliament, but Farage wins the clips, and in today's world, clips are currency." And they're not wrong. Within hours, snippets of the confrontation were all over X, formerly Twitter. Some users praised Starmer's composure. Others said he looked cornered. One post that gained over 2 million views said, "Farage said what half the country's been thinking." But what does this moment really mean? Farage, Reform UK leader, remains one of the most influential figures in Britain's right-wing politics. His movements still shape the narrative, especially when it comes to immigration, national identity, and Britain's place in the world. Starmer, meanwhile, is in the most delicate stage of his premiership. He's juggling economic recovery, international diplomacy, and a public that's increasingly skeptical of establishment politics. So when these two figures collide, it's not just about policy, it's about power. About who truly speaks for Britain's future. And that's why this confrontation has struck such a nerve. A few insiders told The Telegraph that this heated exchange wasn't entirely spontaneous. Farage knew exactly what he was doing, one MP said. He wanted to provoke Starmer into revealing frustration, and it worked, at least for a moment. Another source within Labour downplayed it, saying, "Starmer handled himself exactly as a Prime Minister should: calm, factual, and unbothered by populist theatrics." But the public doesn't always reward calmness. They reward emotion. And that's where Farage excels. His speeches, even when controversial, connect with a raw feeling many Britons still hold, that Brexit wasn't fully realized, that national sovereignty still feels compromised. So when he stood up in Parliament and challenged the Prime Minister directly, it wasn't just another debate. It was symbolic. A reminder that the Brexit question, the identity question, still hasn't been settled in the hearts of many. Online, Reactions have been polarizing. Supporters of Starmer praised his restraint, saying, "He handled a shouting match like a statesman." Meanwhile, Farage's base cheered him as a truth-teller. One user posted, "He's the only one brave enough to say it to Starmer's face." Even neutral commentators noted how the moment captured Britain's current divide, not left versus right, but insiders versus outsiders, calm governance versus outspoken populism. And that divide is shaping every headline, every poll, and every public conversation about what comes next. So where does this leave us? For Starmer, this was a test, and while he passed with composure, it showed how fragile his position still is in the court of public opinion. For Farage, it was a reminder to the political class that he's not going anywhere. Even outside the formal structures of power, his words still dominate airtime, trend lists, and dinner table debates. And for the British public, it's one more sign that the story of Brexit, the identity of Britain, and the future of its leadership are all still very much up for debate. As one political analyst summed it up perfectly on Sky News, Starmer might have won the argument, but Farage won the moment. And that's the real headline here. Because in modern politics, moments matter. They define perception, they set narratives, and sometimes they change everything. So the question is, after this clash in Parliament, what happens next? Because if this was just the beginning, the next showdown could be even bigger.